My name is Margaret Ellis. 118 this past spring. 118. When people hear that number, they don't see a woman. They see a headline. They lean in and ask me the same thing every single time. How in the world are you still alive? They expect some tidy answer, some magic list. Kale, vitamins, a spoon of something every morning, a secret recipe passed down from my grandmother. I always smile a little at that. It would be easier if it were about food. It would be easier if I could hand you a grocery list and say, "Here, this is why I made it this far." But if I'm telling you the truth, and I am, it was never about what I put on my plate. It was about what I carried in my chest and somehow didn't let crush me. I came into this world in 1909. Imagine that for a second. No television, no internet, no airplanes flying overhead every hour. I have watched the world split itself open in 2 world wars. I have stood in rooms where radios whispered news that changed families forever. I have seen people younger than you and me disappear before they even had the chance to grow old. And I have buried more people than I ever thought a heart could handle. My friends, my brothers and sisters, my husband, even one of my children. That is something nobody tells you about long life. It is not just candles on a cake. It is standing at a lot of graves. Longevity is not about staying alive. It is about staying steady when everything you knew shifts under your feet. When I was a little girl, life was plain and it was tough. We didn't have money to spare. Winters were sharp. I remember mornings when the air inside the house felt like it belonged outside. My mother stitched clothes by hand at the kitchen table. There was no time to talk about feelings. You got up, you worked, you did what had to be done, and you kept moving. But even as a child, I felt things big. Too big sometimes. I would lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, worrying about things that hadn't even happened. Storms that were not there yet, losses that hadn't come. Nobody called it anxiety back then. They called it imagination, said I had an active mind. But it didn't feel creative. It felt heavy, like carrying a sack of rocks nobody else could see. As I got older, I learned to carry that weight quietly. That's what women did. We swallowed it and smiled. I married young. My husband was a good man, calm, dependable. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it mattered. We built our life during years that were anything but stable. Money was tight, work was uncertain. Some nights we went to bed not knowing how the next month would look. But somehow we always found a way through. I don't know how, we just did. Then at 38, I lost my father. That was the first time grief hit me hard enough to knock the breath out of me. It felt like the floor vanished, like I was floating with nothing solid under me. But I had children at home, I had meals to cook and laundry to fold, so I wiped my face, cleared my throat, and kept going. That became my pattern. Feel it deeply, keep walking anyway. Years rolled on. The kids grew taller. The world got louder. New machines, new rules, new fears. And then came the hardest morning of my life. After almost 50 years beside that man, I woke up and he was gone. Just like that. The house was so quiet it rang in my ears. His chair sat there like it was waiting for him. His slippers by the bed. The silence felt louder than any thunderstorm I had ever heard. For a few weeks, people came by. They brought casseroles, they hugged me, they said kind things, and then they drifted back to their own busy lives, and I was left in a house filled with echoes. I'll tell you something most people are too polite to say out loud. There were nights I went to sleep hoping I wouldn't open my eyes in the morning, not because I wanted to die, but because I did not know how to keep living without him. That's the part nobody puts in the birthday cards. Living a long time means saying goodbye over and over again. It means holding memories that sometimes weigh more than your bones. But here's what kept me here. I refused to let sorrow become my whole name. I let myself cry. Oh, I cried. In the kitchen, in the shower, sitting on the edge of the bed. I let myself miss him so bad it hurt in my ribs. But I also made myself do small things. I made the bed. I watered the plants. I walked to the mailbox even on days when I didn't see the point. Those tiny acts saved my life. I'm not exaggerating. When I turned 90, people started calling me strong. I almost laughed. Strength isn't loud, it doesn't shout, it doesn't flex. It's getting up when nothing feels exciting anymore. It's brushing your hair when you'd rather stay under the covers. At 100, I started to feel invisible. The world was racing ahead, everyone staring at little glowing screens, conversations filled with words I didn't recognize. I felt like I had stepped into someone else's movie. That can shake you. Feeling left behind can mess with your head in a quiet way. But instead of fighting it, I got curious. I asked my grandchildren to show me things, slowly, twice if needed. I let myself not understand everything. I realized I didn't need to master the new world to still belong in it. Now here I am, past 117, waking up each morning with one simple thought. I am still here. There must be a reason. My body is slower. My hands tremble some days. My steps are careful, but my mind is clear, and I'll tell you why. I stopped wrestling with life. I stopped demanding that it be fair. The truth about living this long is not avoiding pain. It is learning how to carry it without letting it define you. I forgave people, some who never apologized. I forgave myself, too, for sharp words, for missed chances, for old mistakes that used to wake me up at 2 a.m. If you want to survive emotionally, not just physically, you have to let go of bitterness. Bitterness will age you faster than any wrinkle ever could. You cannot control how many years you get, but you can control how tightly you grip your anger. And if you loosen that grip,
even a heavy life starts to feel lighter. I'm not here because I was fearless. I was scared plenty of times. I'm here because every morning I chose to wake up. One more day, one more breath, one more try. And sometimes that is enough. If you're still with me, let me tell you about the years that almost broke me. Because it wasn't my childhood. It wasn't even losing my father. It was my 40s and 50s. People think long life means smooth decades lined up like neat books on a shelf. It doesn't. There were years I felt like I was barely holding it together.
The world was tense. War hung in the air. News traveled slower back then, but when it arrived, it hit like a hammer. I remember sitting by the radio at night, holding my breath, waiting for updates. Even when my own house was safe, my heart wasn't. Living like that changes you. You start bracing for bad news before it even shows up. That kind of constant alertness settles into your bones. I didn't have words for it back then, but I was living in quiet anxiety. My children were growing. My husband worked long hours. I kept the house running, meals on time, clothes clean, smile ready. But inside I was worn thin, not in my muscles, in my spirit. There were mornings I woke up with this weight on my chest I couldn't explain. Nothing was wrong exactly, but everything felt fragile. I would look at my family at the breakfast table and feel this sudden wave of fear. What if I lose them? What if something happens? That fear followed me around all day. Back then, nobody talked about mental health. If you felt overwhelmed, you called it nerves or stress and kept going. So that's what I did. I kept going. And then life tested me in a way I wasn't ready for. One of my children got very sick. Hospitals became part of our routine. I learned the smell of antiseptic. I learned how to sit in waiting rooms for hours, staring at the floor. I learned how to smile at my child while my insides were shaking. There is a helplessness that comes when you cannot fix your child's pain. It ages you fast. Those months carved lines into my face that never fully left. At night, after everyone was asleep, I would sit alone in the kitchen. Just me and the ticking clock. I would stare at the wall and wonder how much more I could handle. I wasn't mad at God. I wasn't angry at the world. I was just tired. Bone-deep tired. Eventually, my child recovered. Thank God. But something inside me had shifted. I realized strength is not endless. Even the toughest person has a breaking point. In my early 50s, I hit what I now understand was burnout. I stopped enjoying things I used to love. I avoided gatherings. I felt lonely even in a room full of people. I smiled, because that's what I had always done, but the joy wasn't there. One evening, my husband looked at me and said, "Margaret, you look like you're somewhere else." He was right. I was trapped in my own head. Saying I'm not okay out loud felt strange, almost embarrassing.
but it also felt like letting air into a sealed room. I didn't go to therapy. That wasn't common in those days. But I started doing something small that changed me. I began writing at night. Not fancy, just honest. I wrote what I was actually feeling. Fear, anger, gratitude, exhaustion, love. Putting it on paper took some of its power away. Around that same time, I started walking alone in the mornings. 10 minutes, 15. No destination, just moving. I noticed birds, the way sunlight hit the sidewalk, the wind on my face. Little reminders that life keeps going even when your mind feels stuck. Slowly, I came back to myself. By my late 50s, I wasn't stronger because life got easier. I was stronger because I understood my own mind better. I stopped pretending I was unbreakable. Long life requires emotional maintenance. You don't just maintain your house, you maintain your heart. And those decades built the foundation that carried me all the way here. I'll stop here for now. In the next part, I'll tell you about what it really feels like to grow older after 60, the part nobody prepares you for. The quiet identity shift, the loneliness that sneaks in, and how I learned to live with it instead of fighting it. If you're listening and thinking this sounds a little too familiar, then stay with me, because I promise you, you are not the only one who has felt this way.
When I stepped into my 60s, I truly believed the hardest years were behind me. I had survived fear, illness, exhaustion, grief, war, financial uncertainty, raising children, holding a marriage together during storms. So I thought, maybe now life will soften. In some ways it did, but it brought a different kind of ache, a quieter one, the kind that doesn't scream, it just lingers. My children had their own lives by then, their own homes, their own problems. My phone rang less. The house was cleaner, too clean. No toys on the floor, no sudden emergencies, no constant "Mom" echoing from another room. At first it felt peaceful, then it felt empty. I remember one morning waking up and realizing no one needed me urgently anymore. That realization hit harder than I expected. For decades, I had been needed every single day. Wife, mother, organizer, problem solver, caregiver, the steady one. And suddenly, silence. Silence can feel like freedom, but it can also feel like being erased. I would sit on the porch with my husband in the evenings, sipping tea, talking about old stories. And sometimes while he was speaking, my mind would drift, and I would think, who am I now? If I'm not packing lunches, if I'm not rushing to fix something, if I'm not holding everything together, then who exactly am I? Nobody talks about that part of aging. They talk about retirement like it's a vacation. But when your identity has been wrapped around serving others for 40 years and that role fades, it shakes you. I tried filling the space. Church groups, volunteer work, community events, smiling, showing up, staying busy. Some of it helped. Some of it felt like pretending, because purpose can't be borrowed. You can't just pick it off a shelf. It has to come from within. And around that same time, funerals started becoming more frequent. First one friend, then another, then 2 in 1 year. Every funeral felt like another chapter closing, another person who knew my younger self disappearing. There's a very specific loneliness that comes from outliving people who remember who you used to be. You can tell your grandchildren stories. They'll listen kindly, but they weren't there. They don't remember you running barefoot across a yard at 16. They don't remember your first apartment, your first car, your first heartbreak. Sometimes I would sit alone and think, there are fewer and fewer people left who remember the girl I was. That realization can disturb the mind if you let it. Then my body started changing too. My knees complained, my energy dipped earlier in the day. Simple tasks required planning, and accepting help, that one humbled me. I had spent my whole life being the strong one. Now my children were carrying groceries for me, making decisions for me, telling me to rest. I won't lie to you. There were moments my pride flared up. Moments I felt smaller. But I understood something important. Strength at 70 does not look like strength at 40. It is not about lifting weight. It is about surrendering without becoming bitter. And then I lost my husband after almost 50 years together, just like that.
The house changed shape without him. His chair felt sacred. His voice was missing from the walls. Grief in your 70s is heavier because you know time is limited. You know you won't build something like that again. For months I moved through fog. I left his clothes where they were. I kept his pillow untouched. It felt like moving anything would make it permanent. One afternoon, I sat on his side of the bed and cried in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before. Not quiet tears, full grief, the kind that shakes your shoulders. And then I did something small. I moved his pillow, just a few inches. But that movement was a decision. I would carry his memory, but I would not turn my house into a museum. My late 70s became rebuilding years, slow rebuilding. I learned how to sit alone without feeling abandoned. I spoke more honestly about my sadness. I stopped pretending I was fine. And something surprising happened. The loneliness softened when I stopped fighting it. Loneliness is not always about being alone. It is about feeling disconnected from meaning. So I created new meaning. I started mentoring younger women quietly. No preaching, just listening, sharing what I had learned the hard way. I realized my value was no longer in doing everything. It was in offering perspective. The world had not moved without me. It had simply changed, and I had to change with it. By the time I entered my 80s, time felt different. In your 40s, you plan decades ahead. In your 60s, you plan carefully. In your 80s, you wake up understanding each year is borrowed. After my husband passed, nights felt heavier. Small sounds seemed louder.
Pouring 1 cup of tea instead of 2 hit deeper than I expected. Setting the table for 1. Watching television without someone beside you to whisper commentary. Loneliness at 80 is not dramatic. It is subtle. It sits quietly beside you. There were evenings I would sit in my chair and feel a wave of sadness roll through me. Not panic, not despair, just awareness. Most of my life was behind me. That awareness can either make you bitter or make you present.
I started thinking about death more openly, not in fear, in curiosity. I would ask myself quietly, am I ready? At first, the honest answer was no. I had regrets, the words I should have said, trips I postponed, apologies I delayed. When you are Beatty, regret feels heavier 'cause time feels shorter. So I made a decision. I would not carry regret into my final chapters. I started making calls, apologizing where I needed to, telling my children I loved them more often, writing letters to my grandchildren, not about achievements, about mistakes, about lessons, about fear. That process lifted something inside me. By 85, my body slowed even more. Doctor visits became routine. Each appointment quietly reminded me, you are living in borrowed time. Strangely, that awareness calmed me. When you stop pretending you are permanent, you start appreciating small things differently. Sunlight on the wall, birdsong, a warm bowl of soup, a grandchild's laugh. But I won't romanticize it. There were mornings fear showed up. What if today is the day? What if my heart stops while I'm alone? Fear can spiral fast at that age. So I trained my mind gently. When fear came, I didn't wrestle it. I would say softly, not today. Today, I am alive. And I would breathe. Slow, steady. Fear loses strength when you stop arguing with it. By 95, many of my closest friends were gone. Conversations became shorter. Fewer people left who remembered the early chapters of my story. That could have swallowed me. Instead, I chose connection in new ways. I listened to younger people, really listened, and I realized something beautiful. Emotions do not age. Fear at 20 is the same as fear at 90. Love feels the same. Insecurity feels the same. Hope feels the same. That realization made me feel less alone. Living into your 90s shrinks your physical world. You may not travel far, you may not move fast, but your inner world can still expand. And that is where survival happens, not in your legs, in your mind. The years past 100, the part where people stop seeing you as human and start seeing you as a miracle. And the truth about that. Stay with me, because the ending is not about years. It's about peace. After 95, something strange happens. People stop talking to you like a regular person. They talk about you.
You're still here? You're unbelievable. You're a miracle. I used to smile at that, because living past 95 is not glamorous. It is quiet, slow, sometimes painfully slow.
By 95, I had outlived almost everyone who walked beside me in the early chapters of my life. Even some younger ones were gone. Birthdays didn't feel like parties anymore. They felt like markers on a long road I was walking mostly alone. There's a feeling that comes when you're the oldest person in almost every room. You carry generations inside your memory. Entire decades nobody else in the room has lived. At family gatherings, I would sit in my chair and watch children run across the yard. And sometimes, just for a second, I could feel myself as the young one again. Bare feet, fast legs, loud laughter. Time gets circular when you live this long. The past feels closer than yesterday. But with that closeness comes weight. I would sometimes ask myself quietly, why am I still here? Not in despair, in curiosity. When you outlive your partner, your siblings, your closest friends, you have to rebuild your purpose again and again. My body by then had slowed dramatically. My hands trembled more, my hearing faded. I depended on others in ways I never had before. Dependence is humbling. There were moments I felt like a burden, moments I apologized too much, moments I wondered if I was taking up space meant for someone younger. Those thoughts can eat at your dignity if you let them. But I learned something important. Needing help does not make you less valuable. In fact, allowing someone to help you gives them a chance to love you. So I stopped saying, I'm sorry for being old. I started saying, thank you. At 97, I began telling my life story more openly. Not because it was extraordinary, but because stories are bridges. When young people sat with me, I didn't preach, I didn't lecture. I told them about the nights I cried in the kitchen, the fear I carried, the mistakes I made, the arguments I regretted. And do you know what surprised me? They leaned in. Vulnerability connects faster than perfection ever will. When I crossed 100, the attention grew. People wanted interviews. Reporters asked about my secret. They expected something magical. There is no magic. There were mornings after 100 when I woke up tired of waking up. Not depressed, just tired. Living that long requires patience with your own limitations. Your world becomes smaller physically. You may not travel. You may not drive. You may not hear every word in a conversation, but your inner world can still grow. I began practicing gratitude in a grounded way. Not poetic, not dramatic, just simple. Grateful I woke up without pain. Grateful for sunlight through the window. Grateful for one more conversation. Simple habits protect the mind. At 102, I lost one of my last lifelong friends. That one hit differently. It felt like the final page of a book closing forever. After her funeral, I sat alone and let the loneliness come. I did not distract myself. I did not pretend I was strong. I just felt it. And then I made a quiet promise. I would not let bitterness steal my final years. Bitterness is heavy.
And at 100, you cannot afford heavy emotions. So I began subtracting grudges, subtracting old resentments, subtracting self-blame. Long life is not about adding years. It is about removing emotional weight. By 105, my days were very simple. Wake up, wash slowly, sit by the window, talk softly with family, rest, reflect, repeat. Routine became stability. People ask if I fear death. By 105, fear changes shape. It softens. Death no longer feels like a thief. It feels like part of the rhythm. What scared me more was not fully appreciating the days I still had. So I practiced presence, not rushing.
Not resisting, just being here. After 110, something shifted inside me. I stopped being afraid altogether. Death did not feel like an enemy waiting in the dark. It felt like the final page of a very long book. I was not rushing toward it, but I was no longer running from it. Birthdays after 110 were quiet. No grand celebrations, just gratitude. One more sunrise, one more breath, one more small conversation. When you live this long, you understand something clearly. Control is mostly an illusion. For decades, I tried to plan everything, but extreme old age teaches surrender. Not giving up, surrendering resistance. If I felt strong, I laughed and talked. If I felt weak, I rested without guilt. I stopped comparing myself to the younger version of me. That comparison only creates suffering. Acceptance became my greatest strength. Around 114, I noticed something else. My need to be remembered faded. When you were young, you want to leave a mark. You want your name spoken after you are gone. But at this age, I realized something deeper. Love is the only real legacy. If I loved honestly, if I forgave sincerely, if I showed kindness when I could, then I had done enough. I did not need monuments. I needed peace. At 115, 116, 117, my days were small in movement but large in memory. My body stayed mostly in a few rooms, but my mind could travel decades in a moment. I could see my childhood home, hear my husband's laughter, feel the hands of people long gone. Memory becomes your companion. Sometimes it comforts you, sometimes it aches. At 117, people kept asking again, "What is the secret?" Here it is. There is no secret food, no miracle vitamin. I survived because I did not let bitterness live inside me. I survived because I released anger before it poisoned my spirit. I survived because I allowed grief to move through me instead of building a home in me. I survived because I forgave myself. And most importantly, every morning, even when I didn't feel like it, I chose to wake up. One more day, one more breath, one more chance to love. I am not fearless. I am not perfect. I am not untouched by pain, but I am peaceful. And peace, not years, is the real achievement. If you're listening to me right now, no matter your age, hear this carefully. Do not wait until you are 100 to forgive. Do not wait until you are 110 to release anger. Do not wait until your body slows to understand what matters. Lighten your heart now. Love while you can. Say the words you are holding. Apologize sooner. Laugh louder. Let go gently. That is how I lived 118 years, not by escaping pain, but by carrying it lightly. And when my final morning comes, I will meet it the same way I met all the others, with a breath and with peace.